Hey guys, it's Blaine Gendre here. Many of you out there are thinking about starting a business and you need to know how to incorporate. Perhaps you're a sole proprietor farm or an electrician who wants to contract to the company you're working for, or even a retail store that just opened. I'm going to take you through a step-by-step guide on how to incorporate and show you some tips, tricks, and some things to watch out for in this video. To get started, there's 3 forms that you'll need to fill out. All of these can be found at the Alberta government website, and I'll include the link below. The first is the Articles of Incorporation. The second is the Notice of Directors. And finally, the Notice of Address. I'm going to go through each one of these in detail and show you exactly how to fill them out. So the first form you want to fill out is the Articles of Incorporation. And the first box you need to fill out is the name of the corporation. So here I have Dunder Mifflin Ltd. You can also have Inc. or Corp at the end. It's really up to you. There's no difference between them. And when you go into the registry, they'll do what's called a nuance report. That's NUANS report. And what this report does is it searches for other names or businesses with similar names to you, so you don't create a name that's identical to a business that's already out there and established. But it does really depend on what industry you're in. So, for example, let's say your last name is McDonald, and you decide to start a food chain called McDonald's with a Z. Probably not going to be okay because of the food chain McDonald's. But let's say you instead are starting a wealth management group called McDonald's Financial Group, and there's no other businesses with similar names out there, that should be fine. The second box is the classes of shares and any maximum number of shares that the corporation is authorized to issue. So in this box you see I've put please see attached Schedule A, and I'm going to show you this in a minute. The third box is the restrictions on those share transfers or on share transfers, and again I'll show you that in a minute. It's a separate schedule. The fourth is number or minimum and maximum number of directors in the corp. So this is so you can have you can really set this as whatever you want. Generally we set minimum of 1, maximum of 15. If you're a business just starting out, likely you're going to be the only director, unless you have a business partner, in which case you might have 2 or 3 directors. But we do set it up so you can, for future growth, if you do want to have more directors, it's better just to set it right here now. The fifth box asks, is the corporation restricted carrying on certain businesses or restricted to carrying on a certain business, and specify here. So if there's certain things that the business is restricted from doing, that's where you'd specify it for. But for the most part, you can just put none here. And then finally, sixth thing is other rules and provisions. And again, I'm referencing that Schedule C here, so I'll show you that in a minute. And then this is where you put the authorized rep signing authority for the corporation. So as an accountant, we are the authorized rep, but if you're doing it, you're likely going to be the authorized signing authority for the corporation. So there's no difference there. So you put in your name and your relationship to the corporation. So if you're the owner, you could put director is probably the best one to choose, your email address, and then date of submission. So here are the schedules that I mentioned previously. The first schedule is the share structure provisions. So it just mentions a couple things about the shares, and then it goes on to identify what the different share classes are. So in this first section, you'll see Class A voting common shares and Class B common voting shares. So these have specific privileges and rights that are identified here. So they have the ability to vote at shareholder meetings. And this section just talks about if the company is dissolved, how the capital split up between the shareholders, and finally dividends. So it talks about who gets dividends first and how much they get each. So Class E and preferred shares and Class F preferred shares have priority on dividends before these two classes. So it's important to identify this in these schedules so that it's understood which shareholders get what. Then it goes on, and these ones are more or less the same and likely won't be used initially in the business, but we've created them just in case. So we have Class C and Class D non-voting common shares, and then the Class E voting preferred shares that I mentioned before, and Class F non-voting preferred shares. So each of these have a different purpose. So primarily the ones that are going to be used are Class A and potentially Class B, depending on what you're doing for tax purposes. We do some tax planning around these, but for the most part, those are the primary ones that will be used. So I'll scroll down here to Schedule B. So this just talks about the restriction on share transfers. So no shares of this corporation shall be transferred without the approval of the directors of the corporation, as evidenced by a resolution of the directors of the corporation. So all this means is you can't transfer shares without the directors approving that transfer of shares. So let's say one owner wants to sell his shares to a friend. He can't do that without the other directors of the business signing off on it. Finally, Schedule C, other provisions. So again, the right to transfer the corporation shares is restricted. We just want to identify that you can't do that. So there's a couple other items here, and I'm going to skip these, but essentially these are just the rules of the corporation. And so this is where you want to be careful when setting this up, ensuring that you have the right provisions in here. It's best to speak with a lawyer or an accountant to ensure these are set up properly. And these can be changed, but it's just easier to set them up from the beginning so it's done correctly. If you have any questions about this, I'm happy to help and can point you in the right direction. So the next form I want to show you is the notice of address. This form also has to be filed when you file the incorporation, and it just specifies what your address is. So in here we put the name of corporation, Dunder Mifflin Ltd. The corporate access number, you don't have a corporate access number until you incorporate, so you leave this blank. And then the business number, same thing, you leave that blank. Section 4 is the address of the registered office. So what some people will do is put this as their lawyer's office. So the reason you do this is in the case of a lawsuit, when you receive a statement of claim, you want to ensure that you receive this document in a timely manner so that you can respond to the statement of claim. So by having it go to your lawyer's office, you ensure that they will receive it and it won't get lost. For the most part, though, people will just put their home mailing address or their office mailing address in here. If you live outside of a city or town, you might need to use legal land description. You can't use PO boxes, so you'd have to put that in here where you're physically located. Next is a records address. So this is where you keep your corporate records, your minute book. So for the most part, again, for small businesses, you're going to keep it in your own office. So you can put your address in here, but you can also put your accountant or your lawyers if you choose to. The next section is address for service by mail. So if you did have a legal land description, one of these, you could put the PO box down here so that you get it by mail instead. The corporate email address, this is now mandatory. They send information such as annual returns to this email address, so it's important that you fill this out. And then finally, the authorized representative or authorized signing authority again. So you fill out first, last name, relationship to the corporation again, and so you can put here director, incorporator, and then email address is optional, phone number, and date of submission, and then you need to sign this as well. The final form is the notice of directors or notice of change of directors. So in this case, it'll be the notice of directors. So we're specifying who the directors are for the business that you're incorporating. In the first box, you want to put the name of the corporation again. The corporate access number, as I mentioned on the last form, is not applicable because you haven't been assigned one until you incorporate. In section 3, we want to put the person that we're appointing as director to the corporation. So in this case, Dwight Schrute,
and he's appointed on the day of the incorporation. And we put his address and his, where he lives. And you also have to specify if he's a resident of Canada or not. If you're going into a partnership or into a business with multiple owners and you want them to be directors, you can also add a section down here for as many as you need. Section 4 is not applicable for doing the incorporation. This is if you want to remove a director from the corporation. Section 5 just specifies who the directors are, so this is somewhat redundant, but you fill out their name and address again. Section 6 is a checkbox that's only to be completed by Alberta corporations, and it asks if at least a quarter of the members of the board of directors are Canadian residents. So for most businesses this will be true, so you just click yes. And finally, the authorized representative signing authority for the corporation. Again, you put their name and relationship and their information down here, and the date of submission as well. Once the incorporation has been completed, there's a few final steps that you want to take. First, you want to register your RP, RC, and RT accounts with the CRA. What these are is the payroll account, the tax account, and the GST account with the CRA. So they give you a business number followed by an RP, RC, or RT, and then 0001. You can do this online on the CRA website. You also want to set up a bank account for your business. So go to your local bank and talk to somebody there and get it set up. Finally, you want to set up your accounting system. So one that we recommend that's free is called Wave Accounting. It works quite well, and it's all online.
So this is the process on how to do an incorporation. The final step is to take these documents to the registry. They will charge you a fee. I hope this video was helpful. If you do have questions, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.